It's been pretty incredible watching the rise in popularity, which, I've enjoyed. It's been great hearing from readers. I said early on that really this series is a story about a man, an assassin becoming a human being. And it's wrapped in a suspense thriller, but it's really about his process of becoming. It's his process of trying to figure out, as I say often, he never learned how to speak the strange language of intimacy, right? And he was taken out of a foster home at the age of 12 when his father figure and handler for the CIA told him, at 12 years old, the hard part won't be making you a killer. The hard part is keeping you human. And that was my interest. I wanted to write a series that the main character really evolves. The books are not kind of iterations of each other. He really moves along in each one. And you can pick up any one of the novels and read it as a starting point. I try and really make sure readers can come in and have a jumping on point. But if you're reading them all along and through, there's a lot of movement and a lot of growth. And he started off very much a lone wolf and is now, pulling into a broader sense of having people around him who he trusts and engages with and all their mess and glory. Dark Horse essentially is, I had this premonition, so Evan has a encrypted phone number. It's 1-855-2-nowhere. Anyone can call it. You can see if you can answer this. If you're in the United States, you can certainly give it a go. Again, it's 1-855-2-nowhere. And he answers the phone the same way every time. He says, "Do you need my help?" And ever since he left the orphan program in the DOD, he fled the program, he went off the radar, and people who are in desperate need with nowhere else to turn call that number and he answers it. And if they're being terrorized by another human or group of humans, he will come to their protection if they have nowhere else to turn. And he will do anything he can to help them. And so in Dark Horse, one of the things I'd long thought about was, well, what if that phone rings and the person who wants help from him is just as dark and complex a human being as Evan is himself? And the question is, he's basically a very, very dark man at the front of it, at the front of the story. His name is Aragon Uria. He's sort of like cartel adjacent, right? He does a lot of drugs, medicines, prescription drugs across the border. He is a billionaire. He operates on the fringes of society. And his daughter has been taken by a ruthless, ruthless cartel leader. But when he first calls Evan and asks for his help, he is more likely the kind of person that Evan would kill than that he would help. And so the central question in Dark Horse is, can a bad man be saved? And that's a question that Evan, when he looks in the mirror, asks himself pretty much every day. And he and Aragonaria begin this dance between each other as Evan moves in and tries to kind of move him out of the aspects of his activity and his empire that are more damaging in order to get a promise from him that he will go try and rescue his daughter. And Aragonaria finds that he's willing to do a lot to try to restore his family. Oh, The Last Orphan, which is the next book that follows Dark Horse, finds Evan very much in an unusual situation. He has long been on the run from the government. He's the most lethal asset that's ever been produced from the DOD. And no less than the president has been trying to hunt him down and take him off the board ever since the startling events of Out of the Dark. And he makes a tiny little error and a massive manhunt is unleashed. And basically he's captured and brought to ground and he's hauled in, and the president has a request for him. There's a very dangerous, brilliant, eccentric, narcissistic, manic billionaire who has amassed enough control that he almost exists as his own nation state. He can swing votes in the Senate. He can speak to foreign heads of state. He can approve international business dealings. He's an enormous player, and he is sort of right on the edge of what is legal, which is another one of the themes that I'm playing with a lot, is how do you step just outside the law the way that Aragonaria does in Dark Horse and have a structure that is, that you could make an argument which is more corrupt, the extrajudicial or the actual judicial. And so this billionaire genius, whose name is Luke Devine, is somebody that his mere existence threatens the president because he arguably has more power than she does. And so when Evan is captured, he's given a choice to conduct the last mission of his life, essentially, to go out and take out Luke Devine. He's so brilliant and he's so uncatchable, and the security is so intense that the only person who could possibly get to him and neutralize him and leave without leaving fingerprints that would trace back to the president is Orphan X. And so he's sort of given a choice, which is, but keep in mind, when Evan left the program, when he fled the program, he swore never to take another mission that was not aligned with his own moral compass. And so he's given this choice now between his life or his code, unless he can figure out a third way, which would be the way of the orphan. And so he's sort of navigating between two of the most powerful people in the world. And Luke Devine, I describe him as a first-rate mindfucker. He is a dangerous, devious, psychologically manipulative human. And so the threat that's represented to Evan in this instance from Luke, in some ways is much more psychological than overtly physical, though the team of security that Devine has around him certainly provides plenty of physical danger as well. And he has to figure out how to navigate that course. And that book ends with him with a kind of series of clues that he didn't ask for that lead him to the man who might be his biological father. Now, Evan grew up in a foster home. He never knew his parents. And so at the end of this, he's put on the trail of figuring out who this person is, who his father might be at the resolution of that. And Lone Wolf opens up in the aftermath. I don't explain right away what happened, but Evan is in the new book, Lone Wolf, which comes out in February of 2024. And Lone Wolf finds Evan sort of taken down to the quick in a way that he's never been before. He's drinking not just the world's greatest vodkas, which he likes, but he's drinking one of them to great excess. It's the first time we've ever seen him drunk. And whatever interaction he had with this man who claimed to be his father, which we'll learn about further on in the book, has left him in a sort of state of emotional wreckage for the first time. So Josephine Morales, his hacker, the 17-year-old hacker who is kind of his charge, and Tommy Stojak, who is his, one of his best friends, his armorer, he's a sniper, kind of tell him, look, man, get back on your feet. You can take something that's really, really small, just a small mission to get you going again. And he says, I never do small missions. But the phone rings at that moment, the 1-855 to nowhere phone. And when he answers, it's a little girl who's gotten his number, a young girl, whose dog has gone missing. And so there's this joking reference. I title one of the chapters Orphan X in the Case of the Missing Dog. So just as he's saying that nothing could possibly be a small enough case, he gets tasked with rescuing this scraggly little mutt. And, we think this is going to be one of the easier missions he's ever encountered. But before long, it telescopes massively, and he finds himself, this case sort of escalates and escalates and escalates and it escalates. And in the course of this telescoping mission, he finds himself on the outs and, locked in life or death stakes with technopolists, billionaires, Silicon Valley, AI experts. And so the case just absolutely explodes. Lone Wolf also features the longest suspense action sequence I've ever written. I wrote there is a stretch of action in the middle that spans numerous chapters where he keeps going, he keeps getting out of the fire and in the frying pan again and again and again and again. And it was an extraordinarily fun run of sequences to write and to contend with. And that's Lone Wolf. I'm working on figuring out where to steer Orphan X in. I'd adapted it once before the book came out, even before the first Orphan X came out. I sent it to Bradley Cooper and I adapted it to him, but I lost him when he went off to produce, write, star, and direct A Star Is Born, which was magnificent. And sometimes that's what it's like. You get talent in and out and you're trying to kind of surf this the right way. So I'm figuring that out now. The Book of Henry was my first film. Both of the films I've had made are original scripts, which I consider myself quite fortunate to have gotten two original scripts made. And that stars Naomi Watts. It took me 17 years to get that movie made. It was the first script that I wrote. I think I was 22 when I wrote the rough draft. A young boy who is a prodigy, an absolute genius, lives with his single mom, who's played by Naomi Watts, and his younger brother, played by Jacob Tremblay. And he slowly starts to realize that the girl next door, who's played by Maddie Ziegler, is likely being sexually molested by someone in her family. And he sets about as a young, very young boy who's a prodigy to figure out how to build the perfect Rube Goldberg contraption and trap to rescue her and to have her abuser meet his untimely fate. First, I co-wrote this one with a friend of mine, Philip Eisner, who wrote a movie called Event Horizon. That's kind of a cult classic science fiction horror movie starring Lawrence Fishburne. And so we wrote this together. The first phase is always story. What's the best story? What's the best script? What's the best version of that? I don't generally write first drafts thinking already about casting. That comes afterwards because I need to be. Oh, I'm sorry about this. Can we pause for a sec?
Yeah, sure.
Here, I forgot to take the landline out of my room. We'll just let it ring through and then I'll resume.
Yeah, just continue. All good.
Sorry, Jake.
Not at all, man. This is going great.
So, I usually just focus completely on the story. And then when it's done and it's sold, at that point, start to think about talent or think about talent to send it to, initially who might be able to set it up. What was interesting is after it took me 17 years to get the Book of Henry made, we took out Sweet Girl. We got Jason Momoa attached 2 weeks before Aquaman came out. And we were shooting 9 months later because they had to fit him in before the Justice League shot. And so it was like this unbelievable opposite end of the extreme that it was just rapidly put into production. And that's an action thriller. Jason Momoa and his daughter sort of figuring out how to avenge the death of his wife and of his daughter's mother after a big biopharmaceutical company makes a series of pretty shady decisions that lead to her death. And so it's like a straight go-ahead white knuckle actioner, which was really fun. Well, I did sell a script called Sabine, also co-written with Philip Eisner, that's like, let's say it's a cross between Silence of the Lambs. Let's just say it's our homage to Silence of the Lambs with a slightly maybe supernatural element to it. And it's called Sabine.